What's up, golf friends? This is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. I'm here with the super producer / super looper, Joseph K. What's going on, Joseph?
Hey, Jim. Not much. What's going on with you?
Not much. We got a little branding exercise. Wanted to run by. We are branding this intro segment with the help of our friends at Strakaline. This is the opening tee shot, brought to you by Strakaline. Remind you guys to use the code DRIVEN. That's the word DRIVEN for 20% off on your yardage books. So there's a chance to get all your hot takes out. It just coming out hot in an intro, cover kind of the odds and ends of what's going on before we get into the episode. So with that, you have the honor, sir.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to our own Kate Smith-Stroh. She
how about it? Yeah,
she officially has some LPGA Tour status. So graduating from the Epson Tour. So congratulations to her.
Yeah, it's super exciting. Obviously, we've been tracking and following her progress. I think it was back in episode 13. I think we had her way back when. But been huge fans of her, and looks like she put some really good golf together. A week or so ago. So that was really, really cool to see. And it's just huge for her. Huge also for her team at Ground Under Repair with Shane Bacon, who was our last guest on the pod. But yeah, that's sort of a segue into my opening tee shot is we're going to cover the men's side of Q School. So, Shane Bacon, he was broadcasting the Korn Ferry Tour Q School finals this weekend. And we got 6 new cards, or 6 guys earned their PGA Tour card, this weekend. I mean, it comes down the wire. It's like you can't imagine I got to get up and down for par, or I got to birdie this last hole, and you got a card on the line. And the Q School is a little bit difficult to follow because everyone's in a different place coming in. Like some have their Korn Ferry, secure, and they have nothing to lose, so they're gonna go all out for this, tour card. If they don't play well, they just withdraw. But you got guys that have no status and they're playing for status. They're playing for starts. And I think that's really, in this day and age, super important to just have a home and have a guaranteed starts, especially with all the changes coming on tour and the less cards involved. So a shout out to all the guys that made it. I want to shout out Matthew Riedel, a recent Vanderbilt grad who I've met before. Just a total class act. Really, really, really fine young man. So really been rooting for him, and he was leading a lot of that tournament. And was kind of limping in a little bit, but he had some clutch shots down the stretch. A clutch birdie on 16 when he laid up off the tee on a par 5. The broadcaster was just sort of questioning that decision, and he just stuffed a wedge into 2 feet, almost chipped in on 17, and he had to make a 5-footer, 4 or 5-footer on 18. Getting up and down to secure his card. So I can only imagine what was going on through his head. So I did want to talk about on driven.golf. I did a blog post, and it's a little bit related to this, Korn Ferry PGA Tour. And like I mentioned, a lot of the changes coming on the tour. This is probably going to be one of the most interesting groups to kind of track the number of starts that this group of 6 actually get into next year. Because as you remember, last year, the PGA Tour quote unquote modelers kind of screwed up because they didn't realize that kind of these rank and file PGA Tour members were going to play in more tournaments than they would otherwise, given the signature events. So a lot of these new grads like Raul Pareda, Blaine Hale, et cetera, the guys were in the top 5 last year. They flew them all out to Hawaii for orientation and said, oh yeah, you're guaranteed to get in that field. And those guys didn't get into the field. So they sort of had a misstep. And I think it's only going to get taken to an extreme this year, given the change from 125 to 100, that those guys that are sitting in that spot, the fully exempt guys, they're going to play in a lot more events because they're going to be looking to jockey position into the top 100. So I think these guys are going to get left out in the cold a lot more often than they did before. So it's kind of going to be a tough road to hoe. I did have a solution to that. I'm just going to put a plug into my universal point system, and we'll put a link in the show notes to that article and encourage you guys to look into that. So that's my opening tee shot. I think that was a par 5, a little lengthy opening hole. But anyways, episode 34, I think this is one of my favorite episodes to date. Somebody who I truly, truly admire in the game of golf. We've got the Baylor men's head golf coach, Mike McGraw, Hall of Fame golf coach, just an absolute legend in the industry. Has won national titles, been part of different national title teams. Joseph, what was your take on this episode?
Yeah, you stole the word right out of my mouth as I was listening to this episode. The one word that came to mind was legendary. He truly is a legendary coach. I mean, you mentioned it. He's a 3-time national champion coach, coach guys like Rickie Fowler, Hunter Mahan, Charles Howell III, Morgan Hoffman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And he's got his own podcast. So I'm sure you guys were able to relate there. And yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes that he had that he was talking about was, in the game of golf, it really is a small world, and you're just one call or one text away from knowing someone else. So yeah, he's a great guy, and it's a great one. So I'm looking forward to listening to it.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how you said that, because that's basically how this episode kind of came together. Coach McGraw, I'll tell you, like he's infamous for being like watching like the younger age kids in Texas in these Texas Junior Tour events. I'd be willing to bet that if you polled these kids and playing the Texas Junior events, like who was the first college coach that saw you play, I bet 80% would say Coach Mike McGraw from Baylor. And when you're 12, 13 years old, it's easy to get freaked out if there's like a guy in a green hoodie or a green golf shirt watching you play. So that's often a learning part of that journey for a lot of these kids. But I'd actually never met the guy, and I was super eager to just get a chance to talk to him. And thankfully, through some contacts, we were able to connect with him, and like someone who has just the amount of passion and respect for the history of the game. I knew we would hit it off. Like I think I was smiling through the entire interview, and even just listening to it, I just can't help but smile, because I think that he truly is a legend. I just feel blessed and honored to have him on this episode. So hopefully that shines through in this episode. We also have a legend in the making in Angle of Attack. Our good friend Andrew Lewis was recently named the Teacher of the Year in the North Texas PGA section, and we just talk about what that means to him. This is something that he's been gunning for. This award for over 15 years now, and just like the recognition from his peers in terms of what he gives to the game and what he's doing with his players, just so richly deserved. And we just get an opportunity for him just to reflect on what that means to him. And I know that it's awesome to see the growth and be a very small part of this journey that he's been on.
Yeah, way to go, Andrew. Well deserved.
So I'm super excited about this episode in both parts. And also thanks to Straka for sponsoring the opening tee shot. I really hope you guys get a lot out of this episode with Coach McGraw. Thanks, Joseph.
Thanks, Jim.
Coach McGraw, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me here today, Jim. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Coach McGraw is the heads men coach at Baylor University, has a wealth of experience. Previously, the coach at Oklahoma State, national title champion, Hall of Fame coach. You've been coaching in some form or another, I think, over 40 years now.
You could count those first 2 years where I was just kind of watching the Edmond High School golf team, but I wasn't really coaching. Probably 38 years total. Yeah.
Yeah. You're also, I think, in the realm of college golf podcasting and amateur golf podcasting. You're the one that we aspire to achieve. And honestly, like a lot of what you've done, I've been a loyal listener to your Better Than I Found It podcast, and a lot of that, frankly, inspired us to start this podcast about a year and a half ago. So I just want to thank you for everything you've done for the game of golf, and for me personally, just telling these stories, elevating the college and amateur game. And like I said, it's inspired Andrew and I to take this leap of faith as well.
Well, thank you for saying that. It's been a labor of love. I've really enjoyed it, every minute of it. It's been fun for me as well.
So, all right. So the one thing I know, I've heard it in your camps, like you are a golf historian. You challenge the kids to try to stump you on your golf knowledge, and I think you're undefeated, or you have a very, very high batting average.
Are you telling me you have a question for me today?
I'm going to take it back to the early 90s.
Okay. All right.
We're going to talk about the biggest golf events in 1991.
Okay.
All right. Can you name the major winners from 91?
Ian Woosnam won the Masters. Payne Stewart won the U.S. Open. Open Championship is slipping me right now. Just give me a second. Ian Baker Finch won the Open Championship, and the PGA Championship was won by John Daly.
Yeah, how about that?
Okay, is that correct?
You're 4 for 4. All right, I have a bonus question. This is a deep cut.
Gotcha.
So Tyler Isenhart was a player. I think he graduated last year, fifth year senior.
He just graduated.
He was from Geneva, Illinois, right? Geneva Community High School. Probably, I assume the MVP of the golf team at Geneva High School.
Very good player.
Can you name the MVP of the Geneva High School golf team from the fall of 1991?
Gosh, I just don't have any idea. Who would it have been?
That would be me, as a matter of fact.
My gosh. I should have said that. I was going to. Okay. All right. Well done. Congratulations.
Oh, yeah. That was many years ago. But, look, like when you go to a small Midwest high school, not a lot of kids go on. They've had a very good golf program over the year. Like I want to take some credit for Tyler's success. We laid the foundation many decades ago for him to do his thing. But when someone goes on to especially go play high level D1 college golf in Texas, like you get noticed. So I've been following his career and rooting for him.
He's going to not get enough credit for what he did at Baylor, but the last 2 seasons we've made the national championship, and both times he shot at the Institute. The opening round of 69 was a phenomenal score. It was incredible, actually. And then this past year at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, he shot 65. So both of the last 2 regionals, he was kind of an unsung hero by opening our tournament on a good note. So Tyler, Geneva, you better believe it. Great play.
Go Vikings. All right. So speaking of high school golf, like let's talk about your path into coaching. I know you played golf in college at Central Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Tried to play professionally a little bit, and then like many folks decided the coaching was the route that you're going to get into. So it started at the high school level. What was that path like? Getting into coaching and then ultimately leading to Oklahoma State.
Well, I was not only trying to play mini tour golf, but in the summers I was the junior golf director at Kickingbird Golf Course. And that was sort of a feeder program into the high school at Edmond High School when they just had one high school. And so I was already kind of coaching. And Mark Mades, who was the high school coach at Edmond, 3-time state championship coach at Edmond High School, was retiring and going into administration. And he said, you need to go back and get your teaching degree and do that. And honestly, I owe a lot of that to Mark, because I wasn't really thinking, hey, I'll be a golf coach. I was just going to be an assistant pro, junior golf director, that type of thing. So Mark got me started, and then I coached alongside Rick Leaf, and we won, I think, 5 state championships in a row. And then I got the job at Edmond North High School, and kind of from there went to Oklahoma State.
So folks are probably aware, but Oklahoma State, probably the most storied golf program in college golf in terms of national championships, and Mike Holder is a legend in the college golf ranks. Also he went to high school in Ardmore, right?
He did. He actually, his parents moved to Ardmore, Oklahoma from Sand Springs, I think, Oklahoma. And before that, he lived in Andrews, Texas. So his dad was a wildcatter on oil rigs. So he just went wherever the job took him, and got to Ardmore when Mike was in high school. So
yeah, so I play. I'm a member at Dornick Hills up there.
Oh, great.
And I know they did a renovation 3 or 4 years ago, and I know that Mike had some input, I think, into some of those changes and based on what he recollected from the course, back in his high school days.
Yeah, Mike was a great player. He won the state amateur. I think he won the conference championship in high school, and Chris Gears was the head pro at Dornick Hills at the time. He was an Oklahoma State former golfer from Oklahoma State, and I think he had a little bit of impact on getting Mike, who was a big University of Oklahoma football fan, Bud Wilkinson, all of that. But I think Chris kind of said, hey, this might be a good spot for your golf, and he ended up in Stillwater.
So I wanted to talk about, so you were an assistant under Coach Holder.
Was.
I think you were also the women's coach prior to becoming the men's head coach at Oklahoma State.
Right.
After I guess Mike became the athletic director after he was the men's golf coach.
I was his first hire as athletic director. So he had to replace himself. I don't think there's been another Power 5 conference school where the golf coach became the athletic director. I don't think it's happened. And he's been basically good at everything he's done. He's never not been good. And I appreciate his, I don't know, faith in me that I could handle the program when he hired me, because, I mean, he could have hired anybody in the country. Everybody would have wanted to coach there. So
yeah. So what was it like? I think working under him, learning from him, obviously, going from high school golf to college golf for the first time. And then also, I think working, I guess, for him, as he's your boss in a different capacity as the athletic director. And then I think also like you're filling huge shoes like that. You had to feel some degree of pressure, and expectations.
Well, I first caddied for him as a boy, so I knew who he was very well. I worshiped the Oklahoma State golfers. That he would bring the Oklahoma State golf team to my dad's golf course in Ponca City, Oklahoma. So I kind of had Oklahoma State golf around me. And then when he hired me to be his assistant coach in 1997, the first class had Boyd Summerhays and Charles Howell III in it. So I was getting, and Bo Van Pelt was on the team that year. So it was a great experience for me. But to learn from him, it was an interesting way to learn. He didn't tell you or teach you all the time. He did it with his actions. And so he taught me a lot. Some things that I wouldn't do as a head coach, truly, he did. It's not my style, or wouldn't work for me, or maybe it wouldn't work for the modern day junior golfer or college golfer. But I was always constantly learning from him, even though he wasn't really teaching. He was just sort of, his example was teaching me. And I feel like he's probably the most iconic figure in college golf history. There's probably never been anybody like him, and I don't know if there'll be anybody like him going forward. But I owe him everything in my college golf career, because he hired a high school golf coach to begin with. And then when he took over as the athletic director, he turned his baby over to me, which was, I was very humbled by that. And I never forgot that. When he fired me 8 years later, I thanked him, and I forgave him on the spot, because it was like, you did so much for my career, and everything I've done in college golf since then, I could kind of trace back to his starting me there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you've had a storied career. You've been involved in 3 national championship teams. So I think I would love to just take a walk back in time around each one of these teams, not only like celebrating their success, but I think the success in a lot of ways may be in directly, bouncing back from setbacks or just like the lessons learned and the memories and the takeaways that you have from each of these championships experiences, I think is in some ways probably different from each other in their meaning and their takeaways. And I think a lot of that can be instructive to the listeners. And plus, I think these are just great golf stories, right? With players that are, household names for sure. So in the 2000 team at Oklahoma State, you were the assistant coach. This is prior to match play, right? So this was just stroke play. Charles Howell III, I think, was the stud on that team. He won the individual title. So what do you remember about that team, and anything that stuck out with Charles Howell?
Well, I remember that team had another future first team All-American, Anders Holtman. It had Edward Lohr, who was a 4-time All-American. It had Landry Mahan, 13th that week, so he's an honorable mention All-American. And an Oklahoma named J.C. De Leon, who I had recruited, and literally he came to Oklahoma State because of my recruitment. And Mike knew that because I'd coached high school golf against J.C. when my last year. But anyway, that team we had suffered a really harsh defeat the year before to Georgia at Hazeltine. And we literally lost the golf tournament on the 16th hole. And after the tournament was over, Mike and I realized the whole week we were playing that hole incorrectly. We were trying to play very conservatively, and the hole destroyed us. We counted a triple bogey and a quadruple bogey that week on that hole. And Georgia dominated the hole because they were trying to drive the green. If they missed that little tiny creek on the left, they would chip it up, make a birdie. If they'd hit it in the creek, they'd take a drop and chip it up and make a par. But we were laying back into a very tough area with a 2 or 3 iron, and then having a longer approach shot. We just didn't play that hole well, and we realized it afterward. The next year in 2000 in Auburn, the 16th hole was a somewhat drivable par 4 over water. If it was any breeze into you wouldn't go for it. But if it was dead calm or downwind, you had to go for it. Otherwise, it was a 5-iron wedge, and it was just two easy shots. But Mike told the guys, every one of you, go for this green if you can this week. Let's win it on the 16th hole this week. And Charles Howell made 2 eagles on that hole that week. And interesting enough, he set the NCAA scoring record for 72 holes. He set the record by 6 shots. So he beat Phil Mickelson's record by 6. He won the tournament by 8. And he actually bogeyed the first 2 holes of the first round. And it was phenomenal. But what I remember most about it was Mike was not a believer in looking at scoreboards. So if he had to coach today where kids are keeping score and constantly looking at the score, it would drive him crazy. But Charles Howell walked off the 13th green, and there was a scoreboard there. And it showed that we were 7 shots behind Georgia Tech. And he didn't panic, but he said, Coach Holder, we're losing. He said, Charles, don't even worry about that scoreboard. It may not even be right anyway. It may not be correct. Well, Charles had a perfect drive in the next hole, a 6-iron for his second shot in a par 5, and made par. Missed the next hole green, had to get up and down for par. Didn't birdie the drivable par 4, had to get up and down on the 17th and 18th for par just to send it to a playoff. What had happened during that time, his teammates made 7 birdies in the last 5 holes. And we tied Georgia Tech. But anyway, I learned a great lesson about I wouldn't focus on scoreboards all the time. I don't think they're your friend.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And then I think maybe juniors are listening. They probably aren't familiar that much with Charles Howell III. I think the guy is like a legendary flusher. Like amongst his peers, he is just revered, right, for his ball striking skills.
They would do surveys amongst the tour players year in and year out. He was constantly in the top 5 ball strikers, and sometimes they vote him number 1. He's still an incredible ball striker. He never lost that. Had one small injury in his career, rib injury, and came back in the first tournament after that injury. He lost a playoff in a tour event. So he was a great player. 17 runner-up finishes, 3 victories, 2 President's Cups. Every kid coming out of college would say, not put his name on that record, but say, would you take this record? And I think everybody but maybe Tiger or Phil, just about everybody else would take that record. He's had an amazing career.
Yeah. All right. So let's fast forward to 2006. I think this is your first year as head coach.
It was.
And then you won the national championship. So what was that experience like?
Well, we had a really good team, and I knew we had a chance to do that. And Jonathan Moore was leading the way. He had just got on a tear that spring. And really one of the great stories in college golf that year, because the year before, his freshman year, he had a redshirt. Jonathan was shooting consistently in the mid to high 80s. He shot 65 on 9 holes. And
oh, my goodness.
Yeah, it was a long story how it came about. An injury he came back from the injury a little too soon and started hitting foul balls. And you don't hit foul balls at Karsten Creek. And so he never really could qualify that year. But Jonathan was the most amazing character I've ever been. I mean, his character itself was about as good as anybody has ever seen. And he never griped, never moaned, never whined, never pointed fingers, never blamed anyone else but himself. And a year later, he's leading us to the national championship at Sun River. And I remember that week walking the last hole with him. And he had a great approach shot, made a long birdie putt. We won by 3. And to think that the guy who literally averaged in the mid-80s his freshman year, never played in a tournament, could win the national championship individually and for his team next year is almost unthinkable. Pablo Martin finished 5th that week and was College Player of the Year, Fred Haskins Award, Jack Nicklaus Award. It was amazing. So we had a great team, but an unsung hero on that team was Zach Robinson from Fort Worth, who walked on basically at Oklahoma State and was a 2-time All-American and the Byron Nelson Award winner that same year. Such amazing experience for me. And a funny story, and Mike Holder won't remember this, but I'm going to tell it anyway. So we're having dinner in the clubhouse at Sun River, and we're getting texts and phone calls and everything. But I only took one phone call, and that was Mike Holder's, because I thought he wants to talk to me right now. He's the boss. I'm going to do that. And I answered, and I said, "Hey, Coach Holder." He goes, "Looks like you guys won the national championship up there." And I said, "Yes, sir, we sure did." And he said, "Well, maybe you should talk to our wrestling coach." By the way, John Smith, who had won 3 national championships in a row. He said, "Maybe you should talk to our wrestling or John Smith and see about how to string 3 or 4 of these together." And I said, "Mike, is that your best shot at congratulations?" And he goes, "That's all you're getting today." But Denisha Kraft, his executive secretary, told me later on, he said he was walking around that office just jumping up and down. He was so excited when we won, but he didn't want to give me too much. It was like, that's Mike's style. And that's the only phone call I took, other than my wife, Pam. Other than that, I didn't take any phone calls that night.
That's funny. And we'll talk about just like the bar of Oklahoma State, because I think that's played a role in, your career as well. So let's fast forward a little bit to Rickie Fowler.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly think, I have to believe, in the last, maybe since Tiger, or maybe even if you included Tiger, has there been a more highly prized golf recruit coming out of high school and into college golf than Rickie Fowler? It seems like it just seems like he had such buzz, like heading in, during his junior days.
He did.
So what was that like recruiting experience like in order to land him? There had to have been, quite a bit, a lot just riding on that.
Well, the day that I got the job, Alan Bratton, my assistant, who's now the coach at Oklahoma State, came into my office and said, "Have you got a ticket to California yet?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" "You've got to go out and see Rickie Fowler." Well, that year before, I'd been coaching women's golf, so I hadn't done too much thinking about what the best junior boys players were in the country. But Alan kept on telling me about this kid named Rickie. Interesting spelling, Rickie. So that was different. And it was like, no, I don't know much about him. What should I do? He said, "Just get to California." So I immediately got a ticket and was going to go out and watch him play in the California State Open. And, but I met everybody in his life that was important to him that I could, except outside his family. And it was 2.5 days of like finding out who this kid was. And the thing that I remember about that visit, whether I talked to the head pro at the course, his high school golf coach, a counselor at the school, the old men, the over 70 gang, the old men at the driving range where he grew up, they didn't talk about his golf. They sort of talked about his golf, but not really. What they really talked about was Rickie the person. And I came back and told Alan, "We got to get this kid. Yeah, he's a great golfer, but there's plenty of great golfers out there. This kid inspires people. This kid, he's just different." And although I didn't get to talk to him then, Rickie took an unofficial visit later that year. And it was, yeah, the rest is history. He's been an incredible ambassador for Oklahoma State University. And I'm kind of thankful that I'll always be connected to his career in some way.
So, yeah, I want to elaborate. So you talked about recruiting him, but what was it like coaching him? Like what did he bring to the table in terms of not just how he dealt with people, but just like how he led by example as a golfer?
He didn't hit thousands of golf balls every day. He hit the balls he needed to get ready, but he loved playing golf. And so really that's the last, significant amount of golf that I've actually played in my life was those 2 years that I coached Rickie, because we'd eat lunch at Karsten Creek and he'd be looking around. Everybody was going to the range and he wanted to play. And so I played quite a bit of golf with him, not very good golf, trust me, but I did play a lot of golf with him. 2 things I noticed. One, he just loved the game, so he loved playing it. Number 2, he never, ever picked up on a hole. He always finished every hole. And we looked for 20 minutes for a ball on number 4 one day. And I said, "Rickie, it's past the 5 minutes." And he goes, "We're finding this ball." He finished out every hole that I played with him those 2 years. And he was just fun to be around. He was a great leader in that way. I had only one confrontation with him in 2 years. Do you want to hear what that is?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So we were in Atlanta and he played a pretty poor round, shot 1 over, and he's on his way to a college player of the year type season. So it was a great year. And he was over there talking on the range after the round with one of his teammates about how bad he was putting and the greens are bumpy and this is bad and that's bad. And I thought to myself, gosh, this doesn't sound like him at all. And by the way, he was the best junior golf putter I'd ever seen. He made everything in junior golf. And he was making everything that year at Oklahoma State. So I called him over privately, not in front of anybody. And I said, Rickie, I was always certain you wanted to play the PGA Tour. And he said, well, yeah, of course I do one day. And I said, well, you won't do it with that kind of talk. You keep talking like that, you'll be an average putter, and average putters do not last on tour. So, okay, so I just said that, not in front of anybody, but I said that. He walked away. He didn't talk to me for a day and a half. He was so upset with me. And he played better the final round, and he played great the rest of the season and led us right through. And so I look back on that, and I thought to myself, that's really the only confrontation we had. He was in contention every week. He did great in the classroom, actually. He was really a good student, even though he didn't like school. I mean, there was little to no controversy with this kid. And I thought to myself, man, he's pretty easy to coach. I just let that thoroughbred run, and I'll go worry about other kids on the team. So I didn't have any confrontation with him at all, pretty much.
That's great. And I guess in a similar vein, we talked about Charles Howell, just the respect that he has amongst his peers. You get the same sense from Rickie, just from the human aspect. He was always a guy like waiting at the 18th green to congratulate a guy who maybe won his first major, first big tournament. And it just seems like nobody on tour could say anything negative about Rickie. But you must have insight in terms of like stories about Rickie Fowler as just a human, just as a great person. Anything you want to elaborate on there?
Yeah, I mean, I remember there was a junior golfer, about a 9-year-old kid in Columbus, Ohio, and I was recruiting at the Rolex Tournament of Champions. So I met him, talked to him that day, and then later on, when we played the regional there in Rickie's freshman year, I saw this kid again, and I told Rickie after the final round, I said, Rickie, see that little boy over there? His name's Princeton. Why don't you go talk to him? And so Rickie went over there and signed a glove, took a photo, did all the normal stuff you would do with a little kid. But anyway, 2 years later, when Rickie was a rookie on the PGA Tour playing in Columbus, Ohio at Jack's tournament, he saw Princeton and he recognized him and called him under the ropes and let him walk the back nine of the Pro-Am. And so Rickie, for several years, I don't know how many years, but for several years on Tuesday night of the Memorial, Rickie would have dinner with Princeton and his father. So I look at that and I think, gosh, he didn't have to do that, but he was just so many occasions like that have occurred. And I told this story just this week when Rickie missed the Tour Championship in 2022. So, he missed the top 30, so he wasn't playing in the final event. I knew he would have 2 or 3 months off. I also knew he was a new father, and he was also, he had been married a couple of years. So his career looked like it was on the downward turn, according to, all the commentators and different people that were supposedly experts. So I wrote Rickie a letter, and basically it said, people are going to remember you for your golf, no doubt about it. But I'm going to remember you for the way you've handled the last year and a half or 2 years when you haven't played well. You haven't been on the mountaintop, but you've treated people the same way as you did when you were on the mountaintop. Nothing changed. And I'm more proud of you as a great husband and a great father than I ever could be as a great golfer. So I'm not trying to tell a personal, story about the letter, but basically that is an illustration of why he's special. He's just as nice a person, just as good a person when he misses the cut as he is when he wins a golf tournament. And that's kind of rare. That's tough to have that because of the pressure they're playing under and all they're doing. So anyway, he's a great.
Yeah. And what you said, I think related to Princeton is, a lot of times like you'll see in the social media age, people are giving back in many ways, which is great. I don't want to bash it, but when you see it on social media, you wonder is that the motivation? Where it's more important, I think people are doing it behind the scenes, like things we never hear about or you rarely hear about, right? It's not motivated by building a fan base or building a brand or just proving that you're giving back.
If you have an agent, he's going to want you to do a certain amount of that social media, so building the brand. But Rickie did a lot of things that nobody ever saw. And I've noticed that through the years, and he's just such a genuine guy. He's really great to be around. And I always tell people, what you see, that's kind of real. That's who he is.
Yeah, I think that authenticity is great because I think a lot of people go out of their way, when they're in front of the cameras to portray one image or one brand, and then you hear stories about them treating people horribly,
Yeah.
behind the scenes, and it's like that's got to be a very tough way to live, right? Like, oh, I got to be on or off or whatever. Like, if you're just true to yourself, it makes life a lot easier.
In recruiting, I tell young coaches all the time, you can do all the bells and whistles and be the nicest guy in recruiting, and because you're talking this kid into coming to your school. But if you're not going to be that way when he gets on campus as a freshman, the authenticity is gone, and he realizes you duped me to get me here. You need to be yourself and do the best job you can of being yourself. And this is kind of what you're going to see when you get here in August. So I hope that young coaches listen to that. But some other more experienced coaches might say, well, you're costing a kid or a young coach a recruit by doing that. I think the people that you need in your program will recognize that you are authentic, you're real, this is who you are. So
yeah, that's going to lead to more wins to offset the losses, I'm sure.
I think so.
All right, so I want to talk about this stage in life. You mentioned it earlier. You moved on from Oklahoma State. I think we talked about just the standard of excellence there and just how high the bar expectations were, not only Mike Holder from a legacy standpoint, but also as an athletic director. And you said you thanked him at the end. What was that process? What was that process like? You missed NCAs. Like was it something that you maybe lost a little bit of your edge or your love of the game or love of coaching, and that showed up in the results? Or what's the story there?
Our team missed the NCAA in 2012, and Mike knew that we had the number one ranked amateur in the world turn pro in the mid-year. So it was kind of like that was a big hit that our team took, and we weren't quite ready. So he understood that, was giving me a break there. But the next year, we should have made match play at Crabapple in Atlanta, and we had it. In fact, we shot the low final round of stroke play. We shot the low round that day, but we also had 5 bogeys in the last 2 holes to miss match play. So it was kind of rough. And when I got back to Stillwater, Mike met with me immediately. I mean, like right when I got in town. And it took him 21 days to fire me. So Mike's never taken 21 days to do anything as far as when he makes his mind up. So he didn't want to fire me. He wanted me to stay on in some capacity. He didn't want to fire me, but at some point he felt like he needed to. He needed a new start, new leader. But when that happened, college golf world is really small. Social media makes it smaller. And the fact that an iconic school like Oklahoma State just fired their coach, pretty much everybody that's involved or interested in college golf is going to know about it. So he had a press release written that said, I was going to be let go, but he didn't want to just put it out. He wanted me to see it. So I drove up to his office on campus and I read it, and it said, "That looks good. That's perfect." And I shook his hand and said, "Thank you for 16 great years, Mike. And I'll figure out something." And literally on the way home, I got a call from Jay Sewell at Alabama, and because it had already gotten on the internet. After literally on the way home, it was being posted. And then a few minutes later, Jay called me. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't thank the guy that did so much for you. I don't know why. Yeah, he fired me, but how am I going to be a great coach if I'm holding bitterness for getting fired? It's like, that's crazy. And it doesn't discount all that happened in Stillwater for 16 years. It was an amazing, period in my life, chapter in my life. So I just want to make sure Mike knew I appreciated it.
Yeah, that's great. And then you got to be a part of another national championship team as an assistant coach at Alabama. It was 2014, and they were back-to-back champions. So what was that like coming into this team? And I think they beat Oklahoma State in the finals of match play, right?
We did. I remember thinking that's the most bittersweet day a college coach could have. You're coaching a great team that's so much fun, and I had a blast in Alabama, but I'm now coaching against all 5 players that I had recruited. 4 of them I coached, and one was a freshman, Zach Olson from Memphis. It's just like, that was such an amazing day for me because I'll never forget Ian Davis and I. Ian was a walk-on at Oklahoma State who was an All-American and was playing his last college event. And his mother made sure she got a photo of me and him after that final round, because it was such a big day in both of our lives. But, you know, I cried for both teams because I loved winning for Alabama. Jay Sewell just resurrected my coaching career for sure. And yet I cried for the Oklahoma State kids and 4 of those guys have played PGA Tour. So it was a great team as well that I handed off to Alan Bratton. But Alan did a great job getting that team back to the finals. So, yeah, that was a great year. And I think I got a great letter from Alan after that championship, telling me he really enjoyed seeing the enthusiasm in my coaching again, because the last few years at Oklahoma State, I did not have it. That's for sure.
So, Alabama, I want to talk a little bit about this team. So they had, I think, Robbie Shelton, Trey Mullinax. I'm probably forgetting a couple of the names.
Yeah, Robbie Shelton, who's a freshman, Trey Mullinax, Corey Whitsitt, and Bobby Wyatt were all seniors.
Oh, yeah.
And Tom Lovelady was a sophomore. So it was a loaded team because Tom's played the PGA Tour as well, and Bobby played the PGA Tour, and Corey's played high-level golf and is no longer competing. But Robbie Shelton and Trey Mullinax are still playing. It was a great team Jay assembled there in Alabama, for sure.
That's cool. And then Wyndham Clark would have been on the Oklahoma State team. So you had coached Wyndham there. I know he transferred after that, right?
Yeah, I recruited and coached Wyndham his freshman year, and really that was the toughest time of Wyndham's life. His mom had cancer and would pass away right in that summer after his freshman year. But I benched Wyndham to get his life in order. I benched him to get his mental health in order. I couldn't have him competing, even though we needed his score really badly. We could use it, but I think if you look back on it, Wyndham and our paths intersected there at Oklahoma State, and I'm thankful they did. Wyndham's a wonderful guy and a great competitor and a wonderful player as well, but he was at a dark time of life. But the truth is, my coaching life couldn't have been darker either. So, I always want to tell young coaches, even when you're really struggling with results and you're not doing a good job of handling those results, you can still have an impact on a kid's life. If you see a kid suffering, or he's suffering with something, is pick yourself up out of those doldrums and figure out how to help your player. And so I'm thankful God put Wyndham's path and mine together, and we'll be connected with that forever.
And I think it's interesting, like probably a lot of coaches in your shoes, like maybe just would have sat around and waited for the next head coaching job to open up. Like you humbled yourself to become an assistant, become more of a servant under Jay. I imagine you're on the lookout or for other head coaching opportunities. Like what ultimately led to the Baylor job?
Well, first of all, Jay Sewell didn't really treat me like an assistant coach, and he treated me like an equal, which was incredible. I think that's every time I think about Jay, I think when I'm dealing with my current assistant coaches, the last 10 years at Baylor, 11 years, I really remember how he treated them and what respect he gave me, how he gave me some responsibility to coach. He let me coach. It was pretty amazing. So when I think back on that, I think humbling yourself is the greatest way to exalt yourself. It's biblical, it's in scripture that you have to humble yourself. And it was pretty humbling going from coaching at that high a level as a head coach to now all of a sudden becoming an assistant coach. I could not, looking back on it, I could not have sat in Stillwater for a year waiting. Every time we went to a restaurant, somebody'd say, "Oh, I'm so sorry you lost the job," or, "Gosh, we really enjoyed, you." No, I couldn't do that. Plus, I didn't want to be out of coaching. And so, Jay made coaching so much fun that year. If it could have been a fly on a wall, the wall that separated Jay and I was just a wall. That was it. Because he'd hear a great song, he'd turn it up, we'd sing through the wall. He would, it was nonstop. He put about that much cream in his coffee, and I made fun of him for doing that. Anyway, we just had an entire year of enjoyment together, and it's pretty easy when you had the number one team in the country to enjoy that part of it. But the coaching aspect and just just kind of, he gave me a place to land. I'll never, ever be able to thank him enough for that.
So this time in your life, I think, was in a lot of ways the inspiration for your book. Is that right? The Better Than I Found It.
Better than I Found It.
And just like the lessons learned, because I know that you journal. Was this basically like a collection of journals that you formed into a book? Like, what was the story around that?
Well, I was sitting in the office the first day at Alabama. I'd recruited all summer long with Jay, and then the team was there. So we were getting ready to have practice that day. And I did two things that day. One, I wrote a letter to Mike Holder to thank him for, well, actually, that's not true. I wrote that the next year. But I did at the beginning when I got to Baylor, I wrote a letter to Mike thanking him again for this opportunity. But that first day at Alabama, I got another sort of spiral notebook out and entitled it Stuff That Works. And then I just started documenting all the things that I had done through the years in Oklahoma State, all the things I'd learned, all the swing techniques, practice techniques, inspiring quotes, stories about players. I just started writing. And that book was filled before I left Alabama. So about 150 pages, two sides, so 300 pages. When I got to Baylor, I continued and filled another book. And so by summer of 2016, when I decided to write this book, I took a bunch of those stories and took it. So it's called Stuff That Works. I'm now in volume 4, about page 80 in volume 4. So I'm over 1,000 pages of handwritten journal of things that I think are important in coaching. And I journaled just yesterday, a good story. So I don't know. I think that book was, I didn't mean to write a book. I didn't know what I was doing. If I write another one, it'll be better. I promise you, Jim. It'll be better.
Well, I know a lot of people have gotten a lot out of it, especially people in the coaching community. But I want to talk about journaling, because I think journaling, is a good idea, but I think probably not a lot of people do it. And for a junior golfer who might be listening, what did you get out of journaling first and foremost that might be instructive? And do you think it would be useful and important for, say, a junior golfer that wants to play at an elite level to be writing stuff down?
The reason I think it's important is I'm not just journaling just to be writing. It's not just an activity. It is writing down things that I think I'm going to refer to later on that might help me in my coaching career. So relating that to a junior golfer, I would say I would journal when you're playing great, when you're playing poorly, any of it. But you could be on top of the world right now playing the best golf of your life, but 6 months from now, you're going to be in a slump. It's going to happen. You're going to be in a low valley. And what happens generally when we go into those valleys is we'll listen to anybody. We get rabbit ears and we'll watch YouTube. We'll watch the Golf Channel. We'll listen to every instructor. Every kid on your team is not an expert, is telling you how to improve your game. I would rather go back and read in my own handwriting the words that I was writing when it was really good. So I'm journaling for my benefit later. I will refer to these notes again. And when I refer to them, they're going to help me get a pathway for where I want to go. And sometimes you're journaling something you just learned from an instructor or a teammate or a coach, whatever it is. But the point is you're going to refer to it later to help you along this path. And, Maverick McNeely, who's leading on the PGA Tour this week, that's why he and I connected when he was at Stanford and I was at Alabama and then Oklahoma State Baylor for 3 more years. We connected because he journals and he does it a little bit differently because he puts it in a computer. I do it handwritten, but Maverick's brilliant. I wish I was as smart as Maverick McNeely. I'm not, but he does journal for the benefit of himself later on. And I think kids, they undervalue that. They'd rather scroll on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok or something instead of writing down things that are actually going to benefit them as a player.
Yeah, that's great. And these lines are so fine between those that make it and don't make it. You want to do everything you can that's going to give you the best chance to make it if truly that is, what you're chasing.
For sure.
Yeah, that's great. So what drew you to the Baylor job?
Well, that year that I was at Alabama, there were about 5 Power 5 conference jobs and another 2 or 3 mid-majors that were all good opportunities. And I did look at several of them, and Baylor came at the very end. Greg Priest was still coaching. He was going to be fine here at Baylor. There was no problem. But he decided to get out of coaching and get into high school athletic administration. And the athletic director at the time, Ian McGraw, said, well, what am I going to do? It's June 10th or June 5th. How am I going to get a coach? He said, just call Mike McGraw. He's interviewing, I know, for some jobs, and Mike's a good friend of mine. And Ian literally called and basically offered me the job over the phone. I said, Ian, don't you want to meet me first? But he said, well, Greg Priest has complete confidence in you to do the job. But the two things: one, my wife is from Houston, Texas, so we'd be fairly close to her family. And number two, I'd be back in the Big 12 conference, which I knew the Big 12 really well. So it all made sense to me. And the faith-based mission of Baylor was important to me as well. So that's kind of how it happened. There were other good opportunities, but this was the best for me.
Yeah, and you guys have had unprecedented success, I think, since your time there in terms of making it to the NCAAs, making the match play. I think not too long ago, tons of wins. Like, I did want to ask this. So, if you look at now or in your time at Baylor relative to the time that you were the head coach at Oklahoma State, what are the things that have changed in the college golf as being a head college coach? And then also, what are the things that are just vastly, things that have changed and things that just haven't changed, like the truths and the absolutes?
Well, the truths and absolutes are, it's still kids who are struggling. It's still kids who have dreams. It's still kids that have challenges. So it's like the coaching part of it truly is kind of the same, even though maybe the kids are more sophisticated now than they were way back when. They've had more instruction. There's more available online for them to learn or whatever. There's a lot more quality instruction going on. So maybe that's part. It's still kids, and they still need help navigating a very difficult time of life. But what has changed is expectations. The athletic directors that actually expect a college golf program to be successful, or you won't last. When I got let go to Oklahoma State, that was a different kind of separate unicorn deal, because it was like the success. I still had one of the best records, if not the best record in college golf for an 8-year period. First team All-Americans, college players of the year, top 5 finishes at the NCAA, total victories, whatever. It was fine, but it wasn't good enough for Oklahoma State and Mike Holder. And I totally respected that and moved on. But across the board in college golf, teams are expected to do more. For one, they're putting a lot more money into facilities at these universities. They're paying these coaches more than they ever dreamed they'd be paid. The level of competition has gone up, and that's okay. That's a good thing. But it also has created a lot of, I think we have some tampering going on in college golf. I think some people are tampering on other teams, rosters, trying to get players. It's kind of things that maybe didn't happen 25 years ago or 20 years ago. So maybe the expectations have created some pressure, and the pressure has created a need to win, and the need to win has created kind of things that we wouldn't normally do. So.
Yeah, I think there's been maybe a slow shift where it feels a little bit more like college basketball than college golf.
You are right.
I do think the one thing that's been unique, and I think it really comes through in your podcast as well, is just how for the most part, the college golf community of coaches, you're obviously like competing against each other, but it really is sort of like in a lot of ways like a brotherhood, where you're really pouring into each other. You're trying to elevate each other, and sometimes like you're putting a recruit on some other team's radar. Like maybe you don't have a spot for him, or like, hey, this guy would be a perfect fit for you. From my standpoint, that probably doesn't happen in a lot of college sports. But like, what do you think that's from? Like, where does that originate? Because I know you play a huge role in that, obviously.
Well, I think it's important to note that, golf. No, everybody's a product of all the people that have poured into him. Now, that's in any sport for sure, but in golf, it's we're a small niche group. Yeah. And if I don't know somebody in the golf business, or in the world of golf, I know somebody who knows him. So it's like, if you've been around golf for a long time, you're never more than just one text or phone call away from getting to anybody you want to get to. So everybody knows everybody. Everybody And everybody knows how hard this game is. Everybody knows how humbling this game is. So all of that together, it's like, I don't mind helping somebody. And I hope that somebody doesn't mind helping me. You've been listening to my podcast, so you've heard tons and tons of Hall of Fame coaches, young coaches, Division III, Division II, national championships, Hall of Famers. But all of them have something to offer. And I don't think they're hiding on my podcast. I think they're actually trying to give information that would show. Well, for one, if I'm a recruit listening to Mike Small, it's like pretty easy to see why that guy's successful. And he gave some of that information in his podcast with me a year ago. It's like, I look back on it, I wanted to interview him for the longest time because I'd like to go spend a week with him, and several coaches have spent a day with me through the years, come down and spend a day and just talk golf. Golf coaches are very giving, I think, even though it's gotten more and more competitive. We're still giving of our time, and I think that's really good.
I think one of the great things you do is you really provide this sort of service to young assistants, right? They're obviously, most of these guys want to be a head coach somewhere, right? Yep. And they're trying to navigate this thing. And look, there's long hours. There's a lot. I mean, some of them were volunteers until a couple of years ago, but like not a ton of. They're not doing it for the money necessarily. They're doing it because they've got a love of the game and they want to be a head coach someday. And I think it's really impressive when you talk about just like, all these coaching trees, I think verbatim, which is pretty impressive, but just like pouring into these young assistants, recognizing, what it takes to be a head coach and mentoring those folks, not only through the pod, but probably just through one-on-one conversations. A lot of just like helping these young coaches kind of connect the dots. I think it's a huge part of the pod. It must be very, very rewarding for you.
It's very rewarding. I love it. And the other thing too is I will often ask a young coach, the first time we've sat down and talked, or they'll see me at a tournament recruiting, we'll have dinner or whatever. I'll ask the question, are you a better coach than I am? And he'll look at me like I've got 5 heads. It's like, what are you talking about? Of course I'm not as good a coach as you are. And I said, well, what's one thing I have over you for sure? And then almost always they say, well, experience. You've done it longer than I've done it. I said, yeah, that's the only thing that I'm certain is better than you. You've got to recognize you've got strengths and you've got to start accentuating those. You've got to start. But like I interviewed Ruben Samjai at Illinois a couple of weeks ago. And I looked at myself and I thought, when I was his age, I couldn't have possibly been as good a coach as he is now. So the level of this young, kind of prototypical college golf assistant coach has gone way up since I've been in college golf, and it's great to see. And Mike Small is a smart guy. He knew a good coach when he saw one, and he hired him. So yeah, the level of college coaching has extremely increased extremely through the years.
So I wanted to probably touch on this later, but I think this is a good time to talk about it now. The one thing that I've observed, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, or if you've given this some thought or maybe even journaled about it, but the 2 words that come to my mind when I think about you and just what I've observed through your pod is servant leadership. And I think that's certainly true for you. And I think it's really true amongst the best of the best in college golf. Like, I think like coaching in general, but I think golf coaches, this point in time of your life, coaching these young men and women, I mean, it truly is like this higher calling, because you have this opportunity to really mold these young people's life, and you're providing them this awesome opportunity, like potentially life-changing opportunity to play college golf at a high D1 level. But then you're also trying to set them up for success in whatever the case may be, whether it be on the PGA Tour or professional life, right? The corporate world or whatever the case may be.
Certainly.
And I think that's an awesome responsibility. And what I observe is like you embrace that responsibility. And in a lot of ways, what I observe as well is like you hold yourself to a high standard, which allows you to really coach these kids to a very high standard as well, because you're also leading by example. So have you thought about this concept of like servant leadership and also like leading by example?
Well, I have. And when I've not been a good example, I regret those moments for sure. But I think we're all servants of, I mean, you, when I take it to the biblical part of it, or the, faith-based part of it, is Christ was the greatest servant leader of all times. He lowered himself to come down to be a man on earth. And so when I look at that, I think to myself, I tried to do what these kids are trying to do. I failed. I wasn't good at it, or I wasn't as good as I wanted to be. So now I'm serving them in their path, in their journey, trying to get to where they want to go. So what can I do for you today? My good friend, Vince Clark, who coaches at McLennan Junior College right here in Waco, Texas. I've never had a conversation with him where he didn't end it by saying, okay, Mike, what can I do for you today? Every single time. And it's sincere and genuine. What can I do for you? Vince is an amazing servant leader, and that's the way he's always been, though it's the way he'll always be. And that's what makes him one of the best coaches I've ever been around. But coaches who really serve their players benefit in the long run way more. So you mentioned those words, servant leadership. I think it's very, very important. I think I try to get young coaches to realize that.
Yeah, that's great. So let's. I want to talk about a couple guys you've had come out either at Baylor now. We mentioned Tyler earlier. Davis Ovard. I'm based here in Frisco, Texas.
Yes.
I think the two probably best amateur golfers in Frisco, Texas are related to folks on this call. So, but in any case, Davis is a name that we've seen for a while. We've been rooting for him. My son, if he had beaten Jay Summey at the North and South, he would have faced Davis in the third round of match play in the Battle of Frisco. So I was kind of really looking forward to that. But anyways, he went on to win the North and South, which was like a tremendous accomplishment. I think got him into the U.S. Amateur. Like, what has Davis meant to the program?
Davis was sort of under-recruited in junior golf. A lot of people didn't really notice him, and I was watching him kind of passively, but I was watching him. I'd watch him 3 or 4 holes at tournament when I'd see him. And one day he texted me and asked me, can I come for a visit? And it was on that visit that I realized I need to coach Davis Ovard, and I needed him on our team. He's a really competitive kid. I think it's a little bit strong to say this, but he'd cut your heart out to win a golf match. So he's very, very, very competitive based, which I love. Wasn't a big kid, kind of thin. So he's still got some growing to do, and he's still got some, getting some explosiveness, trying to build a little bit more strength. So he's got that in front of him, and he knows he needs to do that. But he's a great competitor, and he's a really good student. He's great to have at Baylor. I'm glad he's here. Trust me.
Yeah, that's great. He is a great kid. Great family as well. The other person that graduated recently, Johnny Kiefer.
Yes.
And if folks have been paying attention, he's gone off like a rocket since he graduated. And I think, PGA Tour U is a huge draw for kids staying in school. Like in the days past, you finished school, you would have no status anywhere. You'd have to fight for maybe an exemption to get into a tournament, or you'd have to go the Monday qualifier route. And a lot of guys, they just fizzle out because they just run out of cash for the travel or whatever the case may be. It's just very, very difficult life. And the PGA Tour U has created these pathways, and it's like what you do with that opportunity once you have it. I think Johnny Kiefer is a shining example of that. So I think played really well in regionals and NCAAs, got him to 25th in PGA Tour, which I think is the last spot. I believe it's the last spot to get to the Latin American Tour, and has taken full advantage of that opportunity. Just a string of top performances, won, and he secured his Korn Ferry Tour spot for last year. So talk a little bit about Johnny's growth in terms of his growth in his time at Baylor, and then obviously what has led to this more recent success.
As Johnny, most people don't know this, but he was, when I first saw him as a 14-year-old or 13-year-old, I guess, he was a lacrosse player who just happened to be competing in some golf tournaments. So he was truly a lacrosse player. But I liked that. I love the athleticism he had. I love the look in his eye when he would compete. So I could tell there was something a little bit different about him, and I liked that. And then I recruited him and got him to Baylor. He was an All-American his freshman year. So he was already good. He was a Palmer Cupper 2 years later. And But when COVID hit, I asked Johnny if he thought he would want to come back for that 5th year that the NCAA was giving. He said, absolutely. I'd love to come back. He said, I can't over prepare for the PGA Tour. It's like, I would take another year to get better. And so we made nationals his 4th year. And between that national championship and the following school year, there was kind of I just felt like somebody was trying to get him to transfer. And I'll never even go down that road or anything, but it would look like there was somebody trying to get him to leave the pro. And all Johnny told me was, Coach, my legacy is at Baylor, and this is where I started, and this is where I'm finishing. And he came back and was a second-team All-American. And you mentioned the PGA Tour University. He got the last spot. And it was the ultimate in seizing opportunity. It's like, this opportunity, they gave it to me, I'm going to seize it right here. And I think he finished in the top 5, 9 out of 11 events this summer, and got his card. And they gave him a PGA Tour exemption in Napa, and he finished 13th. He's in the Canadian Open next year because of his great play in PGA Tour Americas. But what strikes me is his character. He's just such a really, really good guy, and he treated his teammates beautifully. He made great grades. He's the only, and I think this needs to be said, he was a 3-time All-American and an Arnold Palmer Cupper, and has now got his Korn Ferry card after one summer. He's the only 3-time Big 12 Scholar Athlete of the Year in men's golf in history. So he was not just a 3-time golf All-American. He was a 3-time best student athlete in men's golf in the Big 12. Great kid.
Yeah, and I think he climbed all the way up to like 201st in OWGR, which is like, you generally don't see Latin American players on the Latin American tour climb to those heights. And even in data golf, which I trust more than OWGR, he was up to like 110. So like, he's basically competing at a PGA Tour level, in the minor leagues basically. So you would expect hopefully that this trend continues to Korn Ferry, and we'll see him on the PGA Tour before too long.
I would just love to be able to hit it 330 right down the middle and putt well. If I could do both of those things, I wouldn't be on this podcast right now.
Yeah. But I think it's sort of instructive, because we talked about a little this a couple episodes ago with Andrew Lewis about like being able to seize that opportunity, because you don't know when these opportunities are going to come. But if you have even a sliver of hope, like, have you done all of the baby steps leading up to that allows you to seize that opportunity? Like, it would have been very easy for him to lament sort of like, oh, I'm 35th in the standings. There's no hope that I'm going to get it. And some folks maybe just give up, I don't know where I'm going to play after graduation. But like, he probably saw the writing on the wall. Like, you could do the math. Like, he's not out of it, right? He has a chance like leading into the NCAAs, and he's made the most of it. But do you think you talk a little bit about his character, but do you think, like, what did he do in college in terms of his prep that allowed him in this extra year to be ready to seize that moment when it came?
Well, I'll tell you, he learned a good lesson too, because he was thinking so much about the PGA Tour University. His actually ranking went down. He played 3 very average tournaments in a row. And that was a blessing, because it got him outside the number pretty good, outside that top 25 by a lot. And he knew, well, now I've got to go play well. And so he finished 6th at the Big 12 championship, 2nd at regionals, and 11th at nationals. So he put on the accelerator, and you talk about seizing opportunity, but we still thought he was 26th. And at dinner that night afterwards, wow, I got a tweet that said, hey, congratulations to the top 25. And I saw his name at 25, handed him the phone, and he goes, oh my gosh, I've got a job. And, the difference between 25th and 26th is 10,000 miles. It's not even, you can't even comprehend it, because one has status and the other doesn't.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're really rooting for him next year. We're tracking him very, very closely. So let's talk about your current team. Talk about how the fall has gone, the construction of the roster, and what the hopes are and goals are for the spring.
Well, the fall was a little bit feast or famine. We had Davis, who you talked about earlier, didn't play his best golf, although he's on his way back, driving it great again, putting it well again. He didn't play his best golf, and Drew was injured, so Drew didn't have his best. So Drew Wrightson. So I think when both of those guys get back in the mix, we're going to be fine. But it was a little feast or famine. We had a couple of bad tournaments, and then we beat Arizona State in the semifinals of the Big 12 Match Play Championship, and we lost in the finals to BYU. But that was 2 years in a row we've been in the finals of the Big 12 Match Play, and I think for this team to have fallen down like we did the first two events and then jump up there and almost win the Big 12 Match Play was really, really a good step in the right direction. So we have 85 days until we go to Palm Springs, and the guys are all working diligently to try to make gains over the break. A lot of it's going to be the physical fitness aspect of it too. But we're working hard on wedges, short game, and we go to Palm Springs on February 15th. I'm already pumped. So
You mentioned the strength training. I listened to the podcast episode. I'm kind of fascinated with just like biomechanics and fitness and speed training. Is her name's Izzy. I follow her on Instagram now, but like you took sort of a leap of faith that like, hey, we need this person on the staff to really get this team and elevate this team to a higher level, more on the physical side. How much of a game changer has that been?
Been huge. Luke Dossie, and Johnny, who both graduated with Tyler Eisenhart this last May, all three of them said that was probably the biggest change we've made in their time at Baylor. When they were freshmen, I was trying to start the process, and then COVID hit, and then it backed it up for a few years. But Isabella Balcells, we call her Izzy, is a physical therapist, licensed physical therapist. So she's got the clinical background. She can do all of that. She's done all the training and more than you could imagine as far as physical fitness, and then just physical as being a trainer. But she's training with their health in mind. In other words, she's training them with a physical therapist mindset in the background, which means I'm not going to injure this person. And if this person has some injury one way or another, I'm going to get them back to health quicker. So I don't think it can be understated that speed is a good thing. But if I'm going to try to go get speed, I'm going to do it in a safe way. Because a lot of guys have injured themselves trying to get explosiveness. And, it's a different world. When I was there, a kid growing up, the instructors were all about hit it, have a great smooth golf swing, be smooth with it, easy rhythm. And the truth is, the greatest player of my dad's generation was Ben Hogan. He had a lot of speed for 139 pounds. Jack Nicklaus tried to hit the heck out of the ball. He swung as hard as he could. And then all of a sudden, for years, they taught be smooth. And they're not doing that anymore. You want to have some speed now.
Yeah, that's great. So I did want to talk about just sort of the current golf landscape, which has been turned on its head, right?
Yes.
Like we talked about, like you serve as a mentor to other head coaches, other, young coaches and young assistants. Everybody's dealing with this stress and this uncertainty. A, like your thoughts on just everything that's happening in the college golf landscape, but then B, what advice would you give to other coaches to navigate this as best they can, and then also to the juniors and parents of juniors that may be impacted by this in one shape or another? What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I think it's going to create a logjam for a few years with current student athletes, future classes, the 25 class, if you will, 26, 27. So all of them are going to be affected a little bit because there's going to be too many people and the rosters got smaller. But once we get on the other side of that logjam, I think it's going to be great for college golf. For one, the mid-majors in Division II, NAI got stronger because of the trickle-down effect with really good players that ended up on their squads. Number two, the Power 5 conference teams will have less dead weight or fat on them. They'll be more competitive. The level of college golf will have gone up at that level. It's going to be better than it's ever been. And the price, if you will, of being great to get on one of those teams, the value of a spot on one of those teams is way higher than it's ever been because we have a cap. So that's the landscape of it. Is it's going to be tough initially because of so many people wanting to be on those teams that can't be on there anymore. But relative to parents and or junior golfers or young coaches, well, let's start with young coaches. I would say coaches should be as honest as they can with their players and do right by the players. If they know that the player's not going to be around, let them know early instead of waiting so late that they don't have a chance to find a spot at the level they want. So I'd be honest there. Parents, I would be, I would say parents and junior golfers to do your best to find a place where you know you're going to thrive. Um, Everybody wants to play at the highest level. So they want to play at Oklahoma State and Georgia and Alabama. They want to play at those teams. But now those spots are going to be prized and they're going to be more valuable. And I don't want to sit the bench anywhere. It's like I want to go play and compete. The best example, maybe of all times, of that would be Zach Johnson, who wanted to go to Iowa. They told him no. He wanted to walk on there, and they told him no. He went to Drake, competed, got better, played the mini tours, competed, got better, went to the Korn Ferry Tour, competed, got better, won, got on the PGA Tour, and 2 years later he won a major. So now I know that's a unicorn. That's a very unusual example, but you got to go where you can play. And so while this is creating a logjam, too many students for those particular opportunities that are way at the top, find some place where you can play and develop your game, because that's what your job is to develop your game.
Yeah. And that's great. And I think if you take anything away from your career, right, is like you had probably what everyone thought would be the number one job in all of college golf, being the head coach at the number one, most storied golf program. And you had a setback and you dealt with it. And then, like, in a lot of ways, you're a better version of yourself now than you were in that time, Oklahoma State, because of the setback and the lessons learned and how you bounce back from that adversity. Like, yes, this is a very stressful time. There is a ton of uncertainty, and it can be frustrating, and people are going to be adversely impacted, but it also creates an opportunity for that bounce back and how you respond to that adversity. You might learn something about yourself that you didn't know before.
Well, and I always ask kids, would you rather be a kid who sits the bench at this major team and you get a ring because they won a conference championship or a national championship, but you never played? Or would you rather go to XYZ University, develop your game, and when you come out of college, you're so ready to go play mini tour golf or whatever it is because you got better? I'd rather get better. And sitting the bench doesn't make anybody better. You can hit all the practice balls you want, but unless you compete, it's going to be very difficult to gauge the improvement you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Coach, you've been awesome with your time. I did want to end with this one segment. We talked about servant leadership and you pouring into the coach community. You probably remember the show This Is Your Life,
yes.
Where people they celebrate sort of the life and career of an individual by bringing back people from their past. So I actually talked to a few of your peers in the coaching community and asked them about Coach Mike McGraw. And so anyways, I talked to Coach Small. Coach Small said his results on the course, along with his commitment to both the game and his players, is a goal and template for all young coaches to follow. To me, he exemplifies success, class, and integrity. So you mentioned Coach Small earlier. I mean, he's in a lot of ways like, I went to the University of Illinois. Like, I hold him in the highest regard. But to hear those words from him, I mean, that must mean a lot.
Pretty amazing. Yeah, Mike and I have a great amount of respect for each other, and he's always invited me to a tournament. And I have turned down other tournaments because I want to be at Mike Small's tournament at Olympia Fields. It's amazing. But he's a great.
So I talked to Coach Scott Limbaugh at Vanderbilt. He said he's a great man, and he's always so generous with his time and everyone. He's a humble leader, and I've learned a lot from him.
Scott, if anybody tries to discount the job that man has done at Vanderbilt, his record speaks for itself, and he's a great guy too. And he and I shared something in common. We both coached for Jay Sewell at Alabama.
Yeah, there you go. All right, I want to talk about someone from your coaching tree, okay. Bill Alcorn at TCU. He said, personally, he's the reason why I'm in coaching. I don't know if I would have considered coaching if he didn't ask me to work with his guys. Once I did, he planted the seed that I could be good in this profession. He's truly one of the best humans on the planet.
Well, Bill was an amazing volunteer assistant when you could still have volunteer assistants. It wouldn't shock me to see him win a Big 12 championship someday, or maybe even a national championship. He's young, he's vibrant, he's smart, he's hardworking. Yeah, Bill's got it all.
Yeah, he's got that program trending in the right direction.
He does.
The last one I don't have a quote from per se, but this person left me instead of sending me a text or whatever, he sent me a 6-minute audio message.
Okay.
And that is Ryan Hybl from OU. And unfortunately, like I couldn't find it on my phone this morning. It disappeared. But one of the things he kind of echoed Coach Alcorn's statement about, he said that you're literally one of the best humans that he's ever met. But he also talked about this story where you were interviewing him to be the assistant coach at OSU. And then immediately after, you drove him down to his interview to coach at OU. I don't know many people that are going to do that. Like basically hand him over to your competition or hand him over to, because obviously you wanted him, but like hand him over to a head coaching job.
Have you ever heard that story?
No.
It was kind of crazy because Mike Holder and Alan Bratton and I were trying to hire Ryan Hybl to be assistant for both programs. And he was in the Atlanta airport on his way to Stillwater, Oklahoma, when Joe Castiglione at University of Oklahoma called him. And so Ryan said, well, I'm going to Stillwater. So as soon as I finished with that visit, he said, no, we'll send a driver up. And that's what Ryan told me during his visit. He said, yeah, Coach Castiglione, Joe is going to send a driver up. I said, no, he's not. I'm driving you to Norman. And I always wanted to meet Joe Castiglione anyway. And we met for breakfast at Jimmy's Egg. And I said, Mr. Castiglione, nice to meet you. Here's your new golf coach. Because I knew Ryan wasn't going to turn down that opportunity. Yeah.
And look what he's done with it since then.
Oh my goodness, what he's done with that program. So,
that's really cool. And I'll end on this, but both of them, Coach Alcorn and Coach Hybl, they mentioned your eating skills.
Oh, no.
So you have this like you're a thin guy. You must have a metabolism of I don't know what, but like I don't know what's the origin story of that. That seems like but they both mentioned it.
Jim, if you had grown up in Ponca City, Oklahoma, one of 7 children, son of a golf professional who wasn't making any money at the Ponca City Country Club, and there were only 3 meals a day, and there was only a certain finite amount of food. 5 sisters, 1 brother, and me. And I just prayed that one of my sisters was on a diet because I'd finished my food as fast as I possibly could and ready to pounce on the next plate. So I developed it right back then. And I walked around hungry all the time. And a hungry tiger hunts best. I've always heard that. But I definitely wanted to go find food. And so I learned to eat fast, and quite a bit of it, but I definitely learned to eat fast.
That's great. Well, Coach, like I said at the beginning, you've been a huge inspiration to me and to so many others. I mean, these are just a few examples. I'm sure I could have called another, 15, 20 coaches, and they would have said similar things. But I just really appreciate how you're just embracing the responsibility and the role of head coach and just being involved in golf and wanting to pour back into these kids and helping really set them up for success in whatever they end up doing long term. I think it's super admirable. And also just like how you carry yourself as a person, your faith being, first and foremost out in front, it's truly inspirational. I just want to let you know that.
Well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate that very much. And thanks for having me on today. This has been great. I think I learned a little bit more about how to ask questions. So you're a great podcaster yourself.
I appreciate that. So anyways, we'll be rooting for you this spring and following you guys closely and following Johnny's progress in the Korn Ferry and all the best. We appreciate it.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Andrew Lewis, welcome to the Angle of Attack with Andrew Lewis. How's it going?
Hey, Jim. Yeah, man, everything's good.
So we may have to rename this segment. It's going to be the Angle of Attack with the North Texas PGA section Coach of the Year 2024, Andrew Lewis. Can we fit that on a t-shirt, you think?
I think you may have to use some abbreviations, but that's fine. Yeah, I think I could make it work. We'll just wrap it around the back like a circle.
There you go. So anyways, we wanted to just take this episode to carve out some time just to recognize what an amazing accomplishment and obviously very, very well deserved that this is. And also just get your reflections, Maybe you want to use this opportunity to just like spitball your acceptance speech that's going to be coming up in February. I'm sure you've already got it all memorized by now. Look, from my perspective, I mean, I truly think that you are one of the best coaches in the country. Your passion, your energy for these kids, in addition to all the technical expertise, I think is what makes you super, super special. First of all, like, what does this mean to you? Like this, you've been at this for a while. I know you've applied in the past and, have dealt with the setbacks and, had changes in your careers and leaps of faith. Like, when you get recognized for something like this, like it's a chance to celebrate, but it's also a chance to reflect. Like, what does that reflection look like?
Yeah, I mean, I've been coaching golf full time since 2008. So, I mean, this is my 17th full year. And I have applied for this thing for probably, I think I forgot one year, but maybe 16 times. And, up until last year, I've never even made it to the final. So, I mean, just kind of the essence of this is, everybody in the North Texas area. So that's, Austin up, and then you go east and west. And so there's a lot of guys coaching, and there's a lot of really, really good coaches in this area. So, last year when I made it just as a finalist, which is really going from probably 150 guys down to 2 or 3, was a huge honor. And then, ultimately to win this, I mean, I remember when I got into coaching, I didn't really know that this was a thing, but when I did, I mean, this was one of my, mountaintop goals was to win this. Just because North Texas is such a competitive coaching market. And, I really wanted to win, not because of the award, just because it kind of proves to myself that, if I can win something like this here, and in this thing you're voted on by your peers, like this is from the section, that it just means that, all that I'm doing and all the hard work is being recognized and paying off. And obviously that's happening with a lot of the success that, a lot of the kids are having. But it is nice to finally be like, okay, I'm recognized also by like my professional peers. Back to when I started coaching, my main goals were I wanted to charge a certain amount. I wanted to coach PGA Tour players, and I wanted to be I wanted to be like a top 100 coach. So I mean, this would be right up there with all the things that I ever really like hoped would happen. Or maybe I'm spitballing here a little bit, but like I think when I got into coaching, I really was bad at it. I was really, really bad at it. I had no idea what I was doing. I really didn't have very many good players. And back in 2013, I went to go spend some time with Cameron McCormick. He's in Dallas Fort Worth. And that was really, the start of this, 12 years later, coming to fruition, because I finally got to see someone coach golf like I had never seen. And literally, you may think this is silly, everyone that left hit the ball better, and I had never seen that. Like when I would give lessons, I don't know if you guys have taken lessons, but like people would leave worse, and I would be telling them like, okay, sometimes you got to take a couple steps back before you get better. And that was, I would argue that was my coaching philosophy, is you got to get worse to get better. And so he was the first one that kind of showed me what coaching should look like. And then obviously working, with him for, 7 or 8 years, and just kind of seeing what it's like day in, day out to have, a level of excellence. But at the same time, my reputation grew, my client base grew, my ability to coach good players grew. And so when I ultimately, like you said, it was a big leap of faith and trust. I mean, I think when you do something like that, you have to have a high, self-value that you're going to leave like this organization that has kind of grown you into who you are. But I was just ready to do that, and I thought that I would be successful. I really did not think that what is happening, since I've done that would have happened. All the success, and even doing the podcast and doing my YouTube channel. And so I'm just really thankful that, since I did leave, like things have kind of progressed even faster. But I recognize that I I don't think that would have happened necessarily without having the original blueprint of like, what does it look like to coach? And so, and now I have guys that, work for me or want to work for me, which is great because now I get to kind of be, have my own coaching tree to a degree. So I know it was a long answer, but that's kind of what I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, so we can just play that video back during the banquet. I think that would be great. Like you'll have the room in tears. Yeah, look, like I have the honor of just calling you one of my closest friends, and I think that golf has brought us together, and just like the passion for the game and just the authenticity that you bring each and every day, and the energy that you bring towards these kids is super super memorable. Like it's super awesome. Like you just like when you don't see that in many people, and when you see it you're just drawn to it. And I think that kids really respond to you because you just care. Like it like you I think you said this back in episode 1, like it's not even like intentional. I think it's just how you were wired. And it seems to me like you were basically made to be a golf coach. You weren't made to be a PGA Tour player. Maybe.
I guess I
Yeah.
was.
So anyways, like talk a little bit about just like somebody who wants to get into teaching. It's not the easiest profession. It's a ton of sacrifice. I mean, even for your family as well. Like your wife,
Yeah.
has to sacrifice as well in order to make this work for you guys. Like, again, just like reflecting on this accomplishment, you think about all those sacrifices you had to make and the long hours and the dedication. And also, like you said, it's a performance business. And like, you don't know if one of your star pupils is going to go shoot a bunch of 80s in a row and you're gone too. Like,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I totally, that makes total sense. Yeah, I mean, my wife's downstairs right now, keeping the kids quiet so we can record the podcast. So going to like the sacrifices. I mean, yeah, this job, it can be very, very hard. I think people don't necessarily understand that when you are part of the team. Like I'm on the team of probably 70 or 80 competitive players. I mean, you wear the performance just like them. You wear the good and you wear the bad, and and whether it's not me hitting the shots, but to a degree you feel responsible. So that's a really, really big piece. Yeah, the amount of take home work and behind the scenes things that I do to try to help these guys and girls is again more like working probably 25 hours of a coaching week is probably more like 35 or 40. So it is a lot of time. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to become a workaholic in this job, especially if you're high performing at it. But you have to just be all in on it, or you're just not going to be very good at this thing. And so as we talk about like what would my advice be, and it seems like I've been having a lot of conversations lately with guys that want to get into this or are in it but aren't happy. I say the number one thing is you just have to work extremely hard. And that doesn't mean going to a bunch of conferences or, shadowing a bunch of coaches or anything like that. It just means when you are with someone, like giving them your full attention and doing everything you can to help them leave that session better. I mean, that's it. You don't need to have a ton of knowledge. Yeah, that's probably helpful. But I know a lot of coaches that I think would say they have a lot of knowledge, but I don't necessarily see them thriving because at the end of the day, the person's just not necessarily leaving better. Like if you can do that, you are going to be incredibly successful in this business. And then, yeah, I mean, besides the working hard, you need to become an expert in, if you want to do what I do, you have to become an expert in junior golf. Like I would argue there's very few coaches out there that can explain all of the different aspects of junior golf, from club fitting to junior golf scoreboard to AJGA rankings to height and weight at certain ages. Competitive landscape is huge, and so like leave no stone unturned on all of these aspects. I mean, even now I was talking to a player today about Wagger. Like, I mean, I'm having to become more. I mean, I just listen to the podcast, listen to Jim, but there ultimately, if you're going to do this and you're going to coach competitive players, you need to have an answer for almost everything. And if you don't, I promise they're going to go look somewhere else. I mean, these kids, they have a very short leash with coaches, and if they're not performing well, they're going to go find somebody else. And so I think that's where you see you see kids generally going to the same 10, 15, or 20 people, it's because those are the ones that have kind of proven themselves. And it is very, very hard to break into that, competitive market. So, yeah, I guess that's my thought on all of that. I don't know what else to say, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I got one last question. I know your players have been reaching out to you with just finding out the news and congratulating you. What was the moment like for you when you shared this news with Cameron?
So Cameron, it's funny. The guy that called me was named Cameron. He's the head of the president's committee that votes on it. But he was in the car when that guy called me, and in all honesty, I started crying just because I really wanted to win. And so he got to hear Cameron Doan, who's the head pro at Preston Trail, tell me, and he was just sitting there right in the car, and he was super pumped. And honestly, I told him when we got to the golf course, I was on the way to start coaching. I told him how much that he is a part of this, because I'm telling you, a lot of the reason that I got kids in the beginning was because Cameron was so good. And people would be like, well, who's Cameron's coach? And I'd be like, I mean, I do most of it. And then they would, his short game's good, his putting was good. So, I think that his golf career has definitely coincided with kind of like the progress that I've had. And, he was so happy. I mean, he's going to be able to go to the awards dinner with me. And yeah, he's a big part of it.
Yeah. Well, this is awesome. Like, I couldn't be more thrilled. Like I said, this is so deserved, maybe long overdue from my perspective, but like just on behalf of all the parents and all the kids that you coached and have frankly just like touched, I just want to thank you. I love you like a brother, man. It's been awesome being on this journey and seeing your growth in your career. And I just love the fact that we get to celebrate this together.
That's very nice. And I have to say that the pod has really been, I think it's been a really big differentiator in my career. I mean, a lot of people that I meet at these junior tournaments, if you've come up to me, I really appreciate it. If you see me at an event, come and talk to me about the pod. But I really think that, this has had a big impact on my coaching and my reach with a lot of the junior players. And just being, when I coach somebody, obviously I'm having a lot of these conversations, but I only talk to the kids that I coach. And so I think it's been a good avenue to kind of let other people know what I'm like, what I think about. And I know for a fact that people have come to see me just because of this. So I appreciate you and Joseph when you guys originally pitched this idea. It has been such a blessing to do, and it's so much fun. I look forward to doing it. And I love you guys too, because it's been fantastic.
Yeah. So let's just keep our foot on the pedal and just keep this going. Maybe back to back. I think, be like MJ and that standing on the stanchion. 4, 5, 6.
There have been people that I think won back to back. We'll have to see. I don't know.
All right, man. Well, don't get too big headed. Don't price me out in the market, but just congratulations on the tremendous achievement.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
All right, let's see it. The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Oklahoma State, better than I found it. Alabama Roll Tide, better than I found it. Baylor Sick'em Bears, better than I found it. Everywhere I go, yeah, better than I found it. Started out as a dreamer, Edmund roots in the dirt. High school golf grinding where the vision gave birth. A servant of the game, yeah, he mastered his worth. Legacy in every swing, a rebirth of the turf. From Ponca City Knights to Stillwater's bright lights. Mike Holder set the tone, but homie took flight, recruited greatness. See Rickie Fowler in his sights, Charles Howell to Pablo, yeah, they stars burn bright. Didn't win them all, but the life lessons attract. Lost the title, gained perspective about how to bounce back. Redemption in Sun River, Jay Moore with the class act. Golf legacy intact, the Pokes were on the attack. Oklahoma State, better than I found it. Alabama Roll Tide, better than I found it. Baylor Sick'em Bears, better than I found it. Everywhere I go, yeah, better than I found it. down to Tuscaloosa, where the stakes got bigger. Ring 3 with the Tide, with a squad full of hitters. Shelton, Wyatt, and Whitsitt, all certified winners. Found the joy in the love, the game re-delivers. Got the call from Waco, Big 12 knocks at his door. Gonna stick with conviction, yeah, he's chasing Ring 4. Kiefer proved the groundwork, shooting straight to the tour. From the U to Corn Ferry, a best fight at his core. With his servant leaders, Cole McGraw's destiny innate. Drove Hibble to Norman, let him carve out his fate. It's the long game we're playing, yeah, make no mistake. It's the men we empower to redefine great. Oklahoma State, better than I found it. Alabama Roll Tide, better than I found it. Baylor Sick'em Bears, better than I found it. Everywhere I go, yeah, better than I found it. This cathedral, the players are his choir. Teaching more than swing paths, it's the life they acquire. Faith in every step, he's walked through the fire. From the peaks to the valley, his purpose won't tire. It's about these young men, not just birds on a sheet. More than trophies in a case, it's the people we meet. It's the battles that we fought, those moments on repeat. It's the stuff that works written when the journey's complete. Oklahoma State, better than I found it. Alabama Roll Tide, better than I found it. Baylor Sick'em Bears, better than I found it. Everywhere I go, yeah, better than I found it. To all the coaches out there, to all my players, I swear, gonna lead the college game, bringing glory to his name. Yeah, better than I found it.